All right, we'll get this show on the road. Welcome. Thank you for joining today's See Me series as we celebrate Pride Month. Thank you to our three fabulous panelists that you'll meet today. And also thank you to our moderator, Judy Thomas. Judy is the past president of the Educational Foundation of the COCPA's Board of Trustees and vice chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. Without further ado, let's get started. Judy, please take it away.
Welcome, everyone. As Stacy mentioned, June is Pride Month, and our See Me series for June is Accounting with Pride. I think that you will be very excited to hear from our panelists today. We have Ben Kilberg, Zach Strath, excuse me, and Zane Sanchez. And we just had a little conversation amongst the three of us. And I found out that our three panelists have just had a revival of Desperate Housewives, which is very interesting to me. Zach has just watched the Wicked adaptation from earlier this summer, and Zane is a Marvel connoisseur, I guess is how I would put it. They are all three of them very active in the LGBTQ plus community, and I absolutely cannot wait to hear their stories. And I think you will be very impressed with what they do and what they are currently involved in. Um, I would encourage you to ask questions. If you don't want to um, voice them, raise your hand while they're speaking, you are welcome to put your questions in the chat. Either way, you can wait till they're closer to being done, and we will put your questions up to them. So take it away, Ben. I can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. So hello, everyone. My name is Ben Kilberg. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm super excited to speak to y'all today. I am a manager in our technology consulting practice at Ernst & Young. So I am no stranger to the professional services world, but I will have to say that I did not choose the accounting CPA path. I think my accounting 101 and 102 classes were some of the hardest classes in business school. So I respect everyone who had that click in their brain for them because it was a challenge for me. But Ernst & Young is a huge accounting firm. We also offer professional services like consulting. So I work a lot with my accounting and tax counterparts on a daily basis when we perform our jobs to our clients. So I'm happy to be here. Super excited to share kind of my origin story and how I ended up to where I am now. I originally hail from a suburb of Minneapolis in Minnesota. Not a small town by any means, but just kind of a typical suburb lifestyle. Grew up and went to school in Chicago. Studied information systems in the business school at Loyola Chicago, and really, I think that's where a lot of my story begins. I was 18. I moved to the big city, quote unquote, of Chicago, and the world felt like my oyster, and that's kind of where I was discovering and figuring out who I was going to be and what my adult life was, and had a lot of different role models and a lot of different experiences there that I had never previously been exposed to. And so much of that was the focus of the education I was receiving, which was very DE and I oriented. It was a pillar of every class I took, including every business class I took, which was sometimes interesting to see how they would weave those themes in and out of the curriculum for a class like finance or accounting or business ethics, what it may be. So I, had started having all these new experiences, and of course, the part of that was discovering my own identity, who I was. Um, Before I knew it, I was coming out to my friends and eventually my family closer to my junior year of college. And that was a really uh, overall positive experience for me. I did receive some pushback, of course, from family, mainly just concerned about my overall health and well-being with some of the stigmas that are around being in the LGBT community. But I think, eventually they came around and I started forming that chosen team, right? That you hear a lot as a buzzword within the community. And so I formed that with peers and with mentors at school. And I felt like I was in a really good place. Like I worked up to it. I got the courage and then I had the big moment and then I was like, okay, right now I'm good. Like everything's going to be perfect now, right? Um, I was pretty quickly humbled. I took an internship after my senior year of college, and they decided to send me to a location in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is typical like Rust Belt town. It's not tiny, but it's definitely giving small town Rust Belt Midwest vibes. And I got there the first day and met all my coworkers and other interns, and I felt myself immediately like retreating back and hiding this part of myself that I had been totally fine with, like I said, the peers and mentors I had in Chicago. So it was something that shocked me. I guess I was scared or unsure, and I thought I was really confident, and it turned out to not be the case. And I basically spent the whole summer hovering, trying to pass, and just not sharing so much of my joy and my life experiences with all of these people because I was like, you know what, I'm only gonna know them for 3 months anyway. Like, why did they care? And I found myself in a pretty unhappy place after that. I wasn't proud of that. I wasn't happy with the decision that I made, whether that was consciously or unconsciously. And I had the opportunity that fall to attend a conference called Out for Undergrad. It's a conference where large firms, whether it be finance, accounting, technology firms like Google or whoever it may be, they sponsor this conference for diversity and inclusive recruiting out of the undergrad at schools that they normally don't target, right? So you imagine, I'm sure that y'all's firms all have target schools that you recruit at very heavily. There's a strong pipeline to speak to the students there and try to get them hired at the firms. But this was specifically for students that weren't in those pipelines, and they wanted to diversify those recruiting pipelines. And it was a really life-changing weekend, honestly. There were several keynote speakers speaking to the undergrad students that talked a lot about authenticity and the importance of being authentic in your work life and how that directly translates to your personal and professional success. And I had never thought about it that way. Like I kind of was selectively out at work and was like, it doesn't really matter. My coworkers don't need to know part of me, and it doesn't impact my performance. And they basically were preaching the opposite, right? They were saying, if you're not your authentic self, you are not your best self. You are not providing everything that you can to your team. You're holding back, and I had like another aha moment where I was like, that's basically the experience I lived in Pennsylvania, and I never want to have that again. So it was actually at that conference that I was recruited to join EY. I have been there ever since, and it has been a fantastic journey. But I learned a lot at that conference when I was speaking with the recruiters about these things called ERGs or BRGs, right? These business resource groups, employee resource groups that exist at these larger companies and hopefully now medium and small companies as well to foster diversity and inclusiveness every day in the workplace, right? And so after hearing about that and kind of the mission and goals of these, I made it my mission for basically the first day that I started and trained with the firm to seek out these groups, right? And to join them and be engaged. And so I started my career with EY in Chicago, where I am now at the airport. Um, but I started my career with EY in Chicago and immediately got super involved in what we call our Unity group at EY. It's the LGBTQ plus focused ERG, and have just kind of been on that riding that roller coaster ever since. So started off in small things, planning social events for engagement, happy hours was pre-COVID, so lots of happy hours when we were all in the office. Um, and other community engagement things like volunteering and of course participating and collaborating with other potential nodes that some of our clients companies as well. So it was really my pleasure to do that. And since having moved out to Denver, I continued my involvement out here, and now very recently have stepped up to now lead our Unity group out here in Denver, and it is my absolute pleasure to have that opportunity to do that. And we just had our, I want to say, yearly inclusiveness council uh, strategy steering committee session, I'd say. And we met with all of the BRG leaders. So, whether that be Unity or if it's for other diversity and inclusive groups, BRGs that we have at the firm, we talked about what our goals were for the upcoming year and for the pillars that we're going to try to accomplish, right? And we all say the same thing. We're still struggling with kind of a COVID hangover. Engagement is not what it was from numbers a long time ago, and then of course there's the outside world, outside of work, right? There's legislation across the country that is sensitive and frustrating to a lot of individuals, to be causing them to have similar experiences like I did in Pennsylvania, where I just felt like I wasn't free to be my authentic self at work. And so, instead of focusing on just getting together, focusing on making sure that everyone feels comfortable and empowered uh, in their positions, both within our firm and also at our clients, to be their authentic self. So it's a challenge. I will say my current clients in Indiana, which is another state that sometimes teeters back and forth on certain issues, and it is a challenge. I sometimes feel myself kind of tempted to go back into that state of covering or closeted communication or whatever it may be, not sharing the joys of my life of my partner or our dog or the house we bought, or just things that are everyone else gets to share and be so free about. So that's what we're focusing on, and what just a quick summary of my story and my experiences and how I got to where I am today, looking over at my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, oh, I was going to touch on, so I talked a little bit about making sure that everyone feels that they're in an environment where they can be authentic. And one thing that we do at our firm, which I am pushing for us to actually include clients in, this thing called proactive allyship training, where you sit down with your team, and it's like a 6 week thing. It's 30 minutes a week, and you go through really learning about what it means to be a proactive ally, not just someone that's sitting on the sidelines or someone where you're like, oh, Ben knows you can talk, like, but rather like advocating and being an advocate. So going from allyship to advocacy, and what that looks like across a variety of different identities across our BRGs within our firm. So I've really enjoyed that program. If anyone has questions about it, it's not proprietary. I'm happy to share if you're interested in starting or doing a similar training. I'd love to share that with you or what the outcomes have been. I'm actively doing it with my client team. It's kind of a pilot, which is fantastic. So that's a little bit about me and my story and what I do now, and what my side job is at UI. Apart from being a consultant, I just get a lot of pleasure out of doing this piece of work, and I hope I can continue to do it. And I appreciate y'all having me on and letting me speak.
So, Ben, I did have a question that's unique to you. You said that you felt supported in your classes, etc., at Loyola, and a lot of people might not know that Loyola is a Jesuit Catholic university, and so it might be surprising to some people to know that here is a Jesuit Catholic university that helps students to be accepted in their diversity, their equity, and inclusion. So, and I can say that because I come from Regis. That's where
Okay. Yes.
I teach. And so those programs, to have it integrated into their curriculum is pretty surprising. And I think that's something that is really important. And Ben, since I have you on the spot and you're in front of so many people, we would love to have you and your programs join us on the DE&I committee to help us broaden our reach as well. So I have you trapped
Absolutely.
now.
Awesome.
All right. And we'll have other questions for you. So we're going to move on for right this second on to Zach and have Zach share his story with us. So, all right.
Awesome. Thanks, Judy. Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Zach. I use he, him pronouns. I have a non-traditional background. I did not come from public accounting at all. If you ask anyone, they will gladly tell you that I suck at math. Anything related to math, not a thing. I was so bad that in college algebra, I had a 38% and they rounded it up to a D+. And so I passed. And I said, thank you, Jesus. And I just went with it. But I grew up in Kansas. My childhood really formed a lot of who I am today. We grew up in quite non-traditional ways. Our family moved around a lot due to a gambling father. And so by the time I was in fourth grade, I attended 13 different elementary schools. So we were constantly on the go. And then when I was 13, I was removed from my family and placed with a family friend. And so for me, looking back now, it is so clear that who I am today is a product of community. And I'm a very proud product of community. I think when, certain figures in my life weren't there, the community really stepped up to help me. For me, I got really involved in the church, and that was a huge part of my identity. I was like leading the youth group. We were all in. All the while, though, I was like, gosh, I think this guy's kind of cute. And I was like, oh, wait, that doesn't line up with what they're saying in the church. And so for me, right around 13 is really when I started having those thoughts. And around 16, 17 is when it kind of came into a clear picture of like, I'm leading two different lives. Like, I love this community that I'm in. They care for me, I care for them, but I know I'm not being authentically myself. And so I really struggled with that. Went off to college to Kansas State. My background is in family studies and human services, so wanting to go into a helping profession. In college, joined the fraternity, did everything you could think of, and it got to a point where I was like, there are some cute guys here on this college campus. I don't want to keep like faking with girls. And so I ended up actually coming out in this long blog post saying I was bisexual. And everyone, for the most part, was pretty good. But as you can imagine, the community I had grown up with was like, no, thank you, being in Kansas, especially rural Kansas. So that was really hard to shake. And I knew that I had to kind of soft launch because I couldn't just say gay because I feel like I felt like I would have lost everyone. And so to me at that time, saying bisexual felt like it was a safety net and saying, okay, some people might be okay with this because it's not fully gay. And so it was a lot of discourse there. After college, I accepted a job with my fraternity as a consultant. And so for 2 years, I drove cross country, moved every 2 to 3 days for 9 months out of the year. Ben talked about Erie, Pennsylvania. Been there several times because Gannon is right near there. And so very much during those 2 years on the road, I had a lot of time in the car to think to myself. And in those conversations in my little head, it became clear that I needed to just let everything go and start fresh. I needed to be who I was. So I practiced every small town I went to, every large university, whatever. I would go to dive bars, I'd go to restaurants, I'd go to all these different places, and I would practice it. So if I was going out on a Friday night and I was like, well, I don't want to sit in a hotel room by myself, I'd go out and I'd make conversation with the people at the bar. And inevitably they'd be like, so are you married? Are you seeing anyone? And I'd be like, no. And I used that as a test, like, actually, like, I'm gay. And so I'd say it little by little to perfectly good strangers. As you can imagine, some people had good reactions, others were like, cool, whatever. And so that helped me kind of build that confidence, saying it out loud more and more as I went along. After I ended that job after 2 years, I did grad school down at TCU in Texas. And I will never forget our cohort. It was like there's 6 women and there were 3 of us guys, and all the girls and I were in one car driving off, and these boys were running shirtless, and the girls were like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh my God. And they were like, which one's your type? And they were all answering it. And the one girl looks at me, she goes, Zach, which one's your type? And I was like, okay, Zach, you've practiced this. You are ready. Come out. And I was like, that one. And so they were like, oh my God, we knew he was gay. And I was like, surprise. And so at the age of 25, I was finally in a position where I was around friends that I could just be open and honest with myself. And so I later that summer went back home for a bachelor party for a friend. We were sitting on the dock at the lake, and I just like told one of them, I was like, I gotta tell you, like, I'm gay. And he took it really, really well. And so when we got back from that trip, I started telling everyone back home. I told family, I told a lot of my closest friends, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, that's fine. And so it was really empowering to me to finally step into that position. So I knew moving forward, I wanted to be in a place where I could continue to be myself. Grad school is only 2 years. I was going for higher education and leadership, and so I wanted to work on a college campus. So I looked at all the universities, applied all over, and I landed at CU Boulder. And so for 3 years, I was in Boulder during the pandemic, which was a whole vibe, but it was so pretty. But the thing about Boulder was it taught me that it is more than okay to be out at work. Obviously, Colorado's fairly liberal in their education system. On that campus, they did so many D&I conversations, workforces, task force, trainings on those topics where I felt so emboldened every day to show up my authentic self. The flip side of that is I was also working with students in residence life. So I was sitting with these students as they were dealing with thoughts of suicide, thoughts of self-harm, assaults, all these things. And several of those students, their issues were stemming from their identity and people rejecting them and them not feeling comfortable coming out. And so that has left such an indelible mark on who I am, and being able to sit in those spaces with those people. It is so crucial that we allow everyone to be themselves, because I have seen like the dark side of that, of not being able to let them do that. And so for me, that work was really meaningful. However, in 2022, we lost my foster mom to breast cancer, and I was like a hot mess, of course. And so I was like, I got to get off college campuses. There's a lot of stress and trauma here, but I don't know where to go. And so I started looking for jobs, came across CBiz where I work now, and I was like, no, thank you. Public accounting, can't do math. And then it popped back up. Someone I went to college with, she sent me a message and she's like, I really think you should consider this recruiting role. I was like, I have no idea about this like field. And she's like, it won't matter, it's fine. And so ended up talking to my then manager and hit it off, got the offer, and I said, hey, before I say yes, can I talk to a gay? And they were like, huh? And I was like, I just want to make sure like I can be who I am in this at this office. Um, I work remotely. We have teams in so many states. And so I was like, I'm sure you can find me at least one person out of 7,000 people. And so they were able to identify one person, just one, who worked very closely with us on our team. So I talked with him, got the whole down low on how that worked. And I realized if I took this job, I'd be going into a place where I wasn't super, super comfortable being fully out right off the bat. With my local team, I was. They knew it. We talked about it during my interview because I wanted to make sure when we were talking with each other, I could drop those things and mention casually that I was gay or am gay, and I'd be in a safe spot. And so I think for a lot of us queer people, we always look for indications and cues on how people respond to local news or things that we say about our personal lives as a way to see, okay, are you a safe person for me? And so I did that during my interview process. And as I was onboarded and as I met my clients that I served, and actually when I started, I worked for our Denver office and so recruited down there. And so felt really good about it. And then the opportunity came to open up or to start up our ERG for our Pride team members. It's really hard because you can't necessarily go up to someone and be like, I think you might be a little, do you want to join us? And so for me, that's where I really felt so connected to the mission of the group and knowing that community was such an important part of who I am and still is, that I can help build that here at CBIZ. We are just over a year old and we have just 105, I think is the last member mark that we have. And so we've been able to really grow that across the states, across our 120 some odd offices. However, I think out of 7,000 people, we probably have more than 100 gay people. And so it is that opportunity to continue being visible. Last week, I hosted a happy hour in Kansas City because we love that. And I'm so thankful to have an employer. We chose a local gay bar and it's really cool because they're so supportive of the community. They have an incredible schedule of events every night. Last year when we did it, people stayed so late that it just ran right into like their drag bingo. And so it was so fun. And when I was talking to those people there, it was very much visibility is so important. It is so crucial that you and your teammates show up, you speak out about the events that we're hosting, you share it on your team's messages, your Slack, whatever channel you use to say, hey, this is going. If you're interested, go. I'll support that. Because, like I said, we can't just say, hey, you should join because I think you are. And so that visibility is important. And showing up every day is also critical to being who you are because it's so brave. It is just, I think it is like the bravest thing you can do to show up to work and be like, yeah, I'm gay. Because the outside world, like Ben was saying, there's a lot going on. Like we're in a record number high of anti-queer legislation, and it's an election year, so I think we have to recognize that and what that means for our communities. And so, for me, having such a supportive system on my local team and then through my teammates across the nation is so just meaningful and special and allows me to be who I am. I think that the visibility part is the coolest piece. We have, of course, corporate America loves LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. And it's small things like my banner all year round is the pride flag with the CBIZ logo on it. Because I want someone to know that as soon as they're on my page, hey, this is a safe spot for me. And so as a recruiter, that really goes into the role too, because as we talk to our candidates, a lot of our students joining us for our internship programs, first year associate roles, they're asking, what are you doing in D&I? Like, what does that look like for you? And so for me to be able to say, hey, I actually serve on this leadership board for the Pride ERG. We also have a BIPOC ERG, and we have plans for maybe a Latinx ERG. So it's really awesome to be a part of those conversations. I think that public accounting in general has a long way to go. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think if we can continue to mobilize on the ground within our ERGs, within our offices, that there's some really cool opportunity for growth and visibility. And so I think that is kind of my little spiel, but thanks for listening to me drag on.
All right, Zach, that was great. I really enjoyed listening to you. And I agree with you is that in employee spaces, school spaces, whatever the case may be, there has to be a safe environment. And I love the fact that both you and Ben use the words authentic. And it doesn't matter what identity you are, you have to be able to be authentic. And legislation, as a matter of fact, I was just bemoaning this morning, is I was thinking about the national anthem actually, and the fact that why is it that we think that everyone is free and yet we're promoting legislation that takes freedom away from whatever identity we are or how we feel authentic. So I really appreciate the use of that word by both of you. So again, I have questions for you too, but I'm going to send them to all three of you. So in order to have three of us, or three of you, I guess I should say, we're going to go on to Zane and let him tell us his story.
Cool. Thanks, Judy. I guess I'll be sure to mention authentic in my spiel as well. No, it is interesting. I think with anything like this, I connect so much with both parts of Ben and Zach's story. I think so many of us have similar stories, so being able to see yourself in other people is really important. But yeah, so my name is Zane Sanchez. I grew up here in Colorado, up in Walden. It's a tiny, tiny town right on the Wyoming border, 800 people. I graduated with 12 in my class. It's a pretty small town, and as you can imagine, a pretty conservative town that goes along with being in a ranching community. So that shaped, similar to Zach, that shaped a lot of kind of who I was growing up and how I saw myself. I never even considered the potential of myself being part of the LGBT community through high school, just because it wasn't something that was talked about. And if it was to put people down. Like, it was like, oh, can you believe so-and-so might be gay? So it was something I just never thought about, even like as a possibility until I came to college. Turned 18, came to college down at University of Denver. I did both my bachelor's and master's there. I actually see Caitlin O'Neill's on the call. I did my master's with her, so we suffered through some tax classes together. But yeah, so I guess I'm holding down the fort for the traditional accounting route. I did my bachelor's in accounting at DU. I did an internship with KPMG while I was there during my senior year. So kind of going through my story, I guess my first couple of years, also I joined a fraternity. Hey, Caitlin.
Sorry, I was like,
Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah. Yes. Like Zane and I have been like connected for like, I think it's almost 10 years.
Yeah, coming up. It's been a minute.
Yes. But
When you suffer through tax law classes, you kind of have a strong connection. But yeah, I mean, so my first couple of years, I did the thing. I joined the fraternity, looked for girls, just kind of, I don't know, did what I thought everyone else was doing and didn't think about it too much. I first started thinking about it. I actually studied abroad down in Chile my junior year of college. And I think being out of the state for the first time ever and being on my own kind of opened my doors to figuring out a lot more of who I am versus where I fit into this community that I already know and already am a part of. And that allowed me to start exploring more things. I went to like my first gay bar while I was down there, which is, I mean, we talk about bars a lot, but it is just like a safe space for a lot of gay people. And that was my first, safe space that I felt like I could go and be myself. So that was when I started to consider it and kind of explore with it. And I came back my junior year and finally came out to myself. I definitely didn't have the courage to come out to my friends or anything, but I mean, just coming out to myself was a huge first step for me because that was something I'd pushed down for so long. So in that part of my life, I was still kind of living a double life. I would like sneak out and go to the gay bars every like Friday or Saturday, but then have my normal life back at college and not let anyone know that I was doing that. And that kind of continued into my internship with KPMG too. I went and I had a total preconceived notion about going into the accounting world, thinking it's super conservative. Everyone's like business and they don't care about DEI or any of that stuff. So I went in and again, kind of led a double life. People would come in on Monday morning and ask what everyone did on the weekend. And I'd always make up some lie in case because I didn't want to say I went to the bars, because then if they asked what bar, I couldn't tell them. So I was still, living this double life. And luckily KPMG did have a really robust BRG network already. So I saw the opportunity to join one, and shockingly, I was naturally drawn to the Pride BRG. But at that point, I made a point to say that I was an ally. I joined as an ally, and if people asked, I'm like, oh yeah, I joined as an ally of the Pride network. But I think it was my first kind of step, testing the waters. Finished up my internship, went back to DU and finished my master's. At that point, I'd started to come out to a couple of friends. So like my really close friends I came out to. With my family, I was in the mindset, I was like, I'm not going to tell them unless I have to. Unless I like fall in love with a guy and get a husband, I'm never going to tell them. So I just had all these things, like preconceived notions in my head. And then when I went back to KPMG to start full-time, kind of continued the double life for a little while, joined the Pride Network again. But about like 6 or 7 months in, the Pride BRG at Denver was actually hosting a national BRG conference for Pride of every KPMG office in the US. So I was able to help a little bit with planning of that, and then got to attend it. And that was the first time I would really thought about it, because I was sitting there in one of the sessions, I don't know, and I saw 2 partners up there, and they were like the leads of their office, and they were out here like proud and out on the stage, like not hiding it like I thought you had to in the business world. So I guess almost like on the opposite side of Zach's story, like I was receiving that, and I was like able to look up to somebody and be like, oh shoot, I can do that. So it was kind of past there where I thought about, bringing my whole self, my authentic self, to the office. And I remember that it was after that conference, for the first time, when people asked what I did the past weekend, I admitted, I was like, oh, I went to Charlie's. And nobody batted an eye. It was all in my head the whole time. It was never an issue. I eventually came out to my family and all my friends, and I was really lucky. Everyone took it, and I mean, it was never an issue. I had built so much of it up in my head. And then, it passed just like getting over it. It turned into such an incredible part of my life and a part of my story. At KPMG with the Pride Network, I ended up taking over as co-chair after like my first year there. So I was able to get super involved, and it actually gave me so many opportunities to do things that I wouldn't have otherwise done. Like as a first year associate, getting to meet with firm leadership to plan some of our events. And more than anything, I think Ben mentioned kind of your chosen community, and that kind of gave me that safe chosen community within KPMG. It wasn't only the Pride Network, but it was all of the other BRG networks. We would partner with the other networks to do events. We did like big events on Cinco de Mayo with the Latino network. We would celebrate Juneteenth, which was just yesterday, with the Black BRG. So it just gave me an opportunity to connect with so many people that were like-minded, and show me that it's not only something that you don't have to hide, but it's something that you can celebrate and make a part of your story and a part of your career. But to say all that, like, I'm still not perfect. I moved to a new company year and a half ago or so, and it's a small company up in Aspen. I work remotely, but it's a company of like 60, 70 folks, Reese Henry. And coming into that, again, like I just fell back into my habits. I wasn't quite as nervous, but definitely in my interviews and whenever I talk to people, I never mentioned, my husband. It was always my partner. And that was to Ben's or Zach's point. It was kind of like a test. I was like, how do they respond when I say my partner? Like, do they know the code that what I'm saying there? And I kind of hid it again for a while, but I actually introduced myself to a client and used my partner. And one of the partners here talked to me afterwards and was like, do you just say, like, why do you say partner and not husband? And I told him, like, I just don't know what's safe. I don't know, like, I'm still not fully comfortable being out with that. And he was like, that's crap. Like, start saying husband, be proud of it. And it helps me a lot seeing that from another whole like workplace. And since then I've really just been doing it a lot more. I say my husband, I talk about, I have to leave this event because I'm coming to sit on a pride panel at lunch. And it's been awesome. So it is really cool to be able to bring your whole self, your authentic self to work every day and not have to hide an entire section of your life from your coworkers. And it's made such a difference in my career and my life in general. So I'm happy to be able to share my story with y'all and hear yours as well. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Zane. I appreciate that, the commentary that you've made, especially given that you grew up in a northern city in Colorado, because very close to the Wyoming border. And, you're probably not old enough to remember the whole Matthew Shepard story, but, kind of that same attitude is very predominant in that whole area up there. So, you could say, well, I need to keep it a secret because look, somebody got killed. They were, going to rob him. And then, here's this hate crime, one of the first hate crimes that we became aware of based on someone's sexuality. And so, it's kind of frightening. I don't want to tell anybody because I could be harmed. So I could definitely see it's very difficult, especially now with all the attitudes that have changed. And the three of you can tell me, at least to me, it feels like we made some progress, and now, and we could allude to lots of reasons why it's been this way. We backtracked so far that it's like every step that we've made forward has been, I don't want to say every step, a lot of it has been taken away. And so where are we now? And I think that's why it's important to make sure that there are safe spaces, that we know where those safe spaces are. So I appreciate definitely your background and where and how difficult it's been. And I'm not taking anything away from Zach or Ben. I think it's difficult regardless, but knowing the attitudes up north, I can appreciate that. So maybe because it's a little bit closer to things that I grew up with, hearing those things and thinking, what the heck is wrong with people? So yeah, I can understand. So for the three of you, and I am, pardon me, you guys, going to open it up for questions from people in the audience. Have you, in your lifetime, really felt threatened by someone or group or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I'll go. Immediately what popped in my head was in Iowa City. We were out of the bars and with my coworkers, and some guy overheard me saying that he looked cute, and he ended up chasing me down the street. My friends had to quite literally like shield me so I could run. And at some point, his shoes came off and threw them at me as I hopped into one of their little cab things. So I think there's also in Manhattan, Kansas, I was hugging friends goodbye, and a car drove by just as I was hugging a male friend, and they yelled out a slur towards me, and we were like, "Oh, okay." And they drove around the block to come back, and they did it again. And so I think these are still very present in our communities. I think at work, they're a lot more subtle, and the ways that it comes across from our coworkers. Um, I always talk to our peers about like, the water cooler talk of, okay, well, if you're asking 5 people how their weekends went and like how their wives are, but you just skip over me, like that's a subtle act of aggression. And it's like, okay, cool. And so it's those little moments you have to really be cognizant about as someone who's not within the queer community, and how you're maybe intentionally or unintentionally excluding someone that who is LGBTQ plus. And so I think it is hard. I think you also talked a little bit about, I felt like we went so far forward and we've kind of gone back. I think that's been really interesting to pay attention to, in terms of, I think a lot of folks in like the queer community see like companies rainbow washing every June, rainbows everywhere, and then July 1st, gone. And for us at CBiz and within our ERG, we're really trying to set the message clearly. We're gay 365. Like we just don't turn that on in June and say, okay, you got 30 days with us. And so it is trying to make sure our employers and our teammates understand like this is authentically who we are. This is, we can't just not show up and be a fraction of who we are. Working through what that looks like in those conversations that happen on the team, whether it's in front of you or behind your back, making sure that they're inclusive and really just not shitty of you to say it about your coworkers.
Oh, sorry. Jim.
Thank you. First, I just want to say I'm just really impressed. And my dog is too. Sorry about that. I'm just really impressed with all three of you. Your backgrounds, your openness, I appreciate that. But you're all very eloquent. Yeah, I just really enjoyed hearing all your stories. And Zach, I can see why you're such a good recruiter. But you all talked about the impact of BRGs or ERGs, and I'm a firm believer in those groups. And just listening, you all had different stories about, being in different parts of the country or different cities that are more or less welcoming or open or even less safe. And I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but it just occurs to me, I wonder if there is a place for the BRG in helping, if you get sent to a particular area for work, particularly, is there a place for the BRG to help with that? And if you think so, it'd be interesting to talk about it. And if I'm just off the wall, just take it as a comment. But thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. This I might tell just a small anecdote that might be more or less relevant, and it has Zach a lot to do with visibility and Judy with kind of stepping backwards. So there are a lot of powerful voices, right, where they know that fear is a huge motivator, and that resonates a lot with people who have experienced unique traumas and or have been used to being scared, right? So I think I'll tell a story about Florida. I had basically sworn it off. I was like, you know what, with what's going on there, they don't deserve my money, they don't deserve anything. And I'm not gonna go there. If I'm asked, I won't. I have family there, they can visit, etc. And and I was invited to go to a conference down there that actually was specifically talking about like DEI initiatives. And I was like, oh well, that's really interesting and ironic, right? And it was one of the first things to address at the conference, and they were like, we are here in the front line, and that is so important that like we are here in this state and being visible, like Zach said, and saying we're not scared by what you're trying to do, right? We're not going to be silent by fear, and eliminated from the conversation because of what we may or may not think, right? So, you know, I think it's easy to go to certain spaces and have that prejudice and you know, in a lot of cases true, like there's literally powerful voices telling you do not come or you're not allowed to be here, and I think that it's just another tactic where we need to feel empowered to be there and to think of that as more of a front line than sitting in, you know, Denver and being like things are great over here, you know, and supporting the people that are there that may not have the comfortability or the experience that we are lucky to have in where we're from, so we can do that on their behalf. So I don't know if I said that eloquently, but that's just a kind of anecdote that I had personally with that year with a similar experience.
Does anybody else have a comment on that? Because I agree with you, Ben, but there comes a point where you have to take care of yourself. But if you believe what you believe, then you have to stand up for what you believe in. I mean, this is a very small example, but if you're going to put a sign on your front lawn that says, all are welcome, or whatever the case may be, then when your doorbell rings at 2 a.m. because someone needs help, is looking for a safe place, then you have to be willing to follow through. And that's just a simple example. And I know that's not what the sign says. But those things, and if somebody says something that's inappropriate, then you have to stand up and you have to say, this is inappropriate. And it's unacceptable. I had that situation come up, and you better believe that's exactly what I said in front of supervisors, etc., because people have to realize they can't get away with it. And I agree that you have to put your money where your mouth is, I guess, is the old-fashioned expression. Joan.
Yes, well, I appreciate what everyone said in your stories. I'm a worried parent. My daughter is bisexual and my son-in-law is trans, and they live in Syracuse. My daughter is a veterinary surgeon, and they fly the pride flag out front. And I know my son-in-law was attacked a couple weeks ago, and so I just am very concerned about their safety. And it's been quite a journey for me to go recognize that my daughter was bisexual and to change my feelings and my opinions through the years. And fortunately, my church is on the forefront of welcoming people in the LGBT community. So I appreciate that too. And I just wanted to say thank you for sharing your stories.
Thank you, Joan. We appreciate it. So Zane, yes, Zane, our tax person. I'll get right back to you, Caitlin. and this kind of relates to, because you work for a company out of Aspen, and you have high net worth clients. First of all, I want to know what qualifies as a high net worth client, because I will never see that in my lifetime. I don't live in Aspen. But all kidding aside, do you find, and this could apply to Zach and Ben as well, do you ever find bias in the people that you have as clients that you have to worry about?
Yeah, first of all, I think normally you need at least 1 million in net assets to even be considered. So once you get there. And I haven't had any bad experiences yet, I guess. Hopefully on that I won't, but it is something that I'm always considering, and that's why I tried to use partner for so long, because I just didn't want to open that can of worms with so many different clients. Especially up here, you just never know with some folks. But I've been lucky. We've actually had a couple of gay clients who are excited to have somebody of the same mind on their account. But in general, I've been lucky to not have that situation. I'm not sure about Ben or Zach on the client front. But yeah, it's definitely something that's always I'm always considering. And I think even to your question earlier, like we've never been physically attacked, but we also, my husband and I don't hold hands in public when we go to certain places. So it still affects your psyche, and it's always something that you're considering to avoid in some cases.
Caitlin, you wanted
Hi.
to say something.
Yes, I just want to say so I know as someone who's bisexual, sometimes sometimes I'd love to say exactly what I think, I feel safe to say something. I said something about some words in the ERG about our company's, how do I say this? Thing about Jew teeth, and in certain groups that you can say, exactly how you feel, and I have my little pride flag at work in my office, I have my pronouns, but how do you, I don't want to say you compromise, but I was sometimes in cases of sexism or ableism because of my disability, I've had to compromise. It's okay, I can't make a big deal about this because I don't want to be unagreeable, or be known as this could have a female element to say being called a female dog, so the question is, at one point, because overall I feel pretty safe at work and I live in Denver, but the HOA, it said political flags, is the pride flag going to be considered political? Is that something I want to fight for? Not saying that I'm not saying I don't care. I just, what's your opinion on how much you should stand up? Because it's there's safety, and also I don't want to say that I don't want to deal with, I have enough. I mean this with being autistic, being a woman, being bi, I have a lot on my plate, and doing so what's, no, I don't want to say your thing, because I don't think I'm being bad. It just, sometimes it's just easier to not, to let some things slide. What's your thing, philosophy on that? Because
Caitlin, I personally say pick your battles. I am old. I am probably going to die. And so I have less at stake than you do. Ben.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's always whatever you feel comfortable with, and um, it what would I say, it's not a reflection on you that you didn't fight that battle today, right? Like you didn't pick the battle, right? And so I'd encourage like not to feel remorseful that you're like, oh, I should have advocated in this way better or more, because you did what you could in the moment based off of 100 different factors of how comfortable you are, what voice you felt like you had in the situation, etc. And I think that hopefully what we can aim to do is create spaces where it doesn't feel like you have to pick and choose or like you're bringing up too much. It's like you can voice the opinions that you wish to, and you don't have to voice the ones that you don't, right? And I think that intersectionality plays a huge part in that because you mentioned that you have certain identities could come off a certain way, and like that might not be subject to someone else, right? And so then I can say, okay, maybe it's my spice, right? Because it's not a grievance with necessarily my identity, but I see someone that needs that support from those biases or prejudices, and it's kind of a whole other conversation. But I think we have to be proud of what we can do and what we are able to do in a situation, and not fall into the remorse, which can be more detrimental to the psyche than not. That's just kind of how I think about it. But I totally understand what you're saying. You're like, oh, I should have said that, or like, am I living true to my values? Those are questions you'll ask, but you have to make the game time decision and stick with it, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just like accounting, like CPAs in the Denver area is an incredibly small group, a lot. So it's like, not saying like don't like I might see something on like social media or LinkedIn and I'm like, well, what, not saying whatever, but just like, I don't have energy to deal with this today, especially if it wasn't like attack on me, like.
So it is overtime, and I want to remind those who have not had to leave to go back to work. What a horrible thought. That next month we are hosting the For Me series. It will be Summer Fun with Meditation. I'm sure that's not what it's called. Jim, I see that grandbaby. So Escape the Heat for so our mini meditation series. So Ben, we have officially roped you in to help us out. Zane and Zach, I know you're not, well, Zane is. You are more than welcome to join us on the DE&I committee. It's not a firm commitment that you have to come every time, but our membership is very fluid. Come when you can, anytime. And everybody, I hope that you will thank Zane, Zach, and Ben. Hey, Ben, you missed your chance to change your name to a Z name. At any rate, they did a tremendous job, as I knew they would. They were great. Thank you so much. It was just absolutely great. I'm so happy you were with us. So I knew you guys would be experts, and I didn't get to ask about disc golf. So come to the next meeting, Ben, so I can ask you about disc golf. All right, but I did get to ask about the wealth. So, all right, we will see you next time. So we can meditate.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ben, Zane, Zach.
Thank you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
All righty. See you.